The crystal wine glass shattered against marble flooring like a gunshot in the sudden silence. Time fractured into slow-motion fragments as Keandra Robson felt her feet slip from under her, the wet patch on the pristine restaurant floor becoming her undoing in front of Miami's most dangerous men. Her tray of expensive Korean delicacies sailed through the air, porcelain plates spinning like deadly frisbees, toward the corner table, where three men in $1,000 suits had been conducting business in hushed, urgent tones. The man at the head of the table, sharp-featured, devastatingly handsome, with eyes like black diamonds, moved with predatory grace, rising from his chair in one fluid motion. Son Goku's hands caught her waist, just as gravity claimed her completely, pulling her against his chest with surprising gentleness. The collision sent electric shocks through both their bodies, her soft curves pressed against his hard planes, her face inches from his. For a heartbeat that lasted eternity, the entire restaurant held its breath. "I've got you," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her chest. His accent carried the faintest trace of soul beneath perfect American English, sophisticated and dangerous in equal measure. Keandra's dark eyes widened as she stared into his face, recognizing power when she saw it. This wasn't just another wealthy businessman dining at Hanbok Palace. This was someone who commanded fear and respect, with his mere presence, the way other patrons averted their gazes, the immediate tension that rippled through the staff. Everything screamed danger. "Sir, I'm so sorry," she began, trying to pull away, but his grip tightened protectively. "Don't move yet," he commanded softly, his gaze scanning the floor around them. Broken glass glittered like diamonds in the ambient lighting, sharp enough to shred her skin if she stepped wrong. "You could get hurt." The practical concern in his voice surprised her. Men like him, powerful, wealthy, untouchable, didn't usually care about the welfare of clumsy waitresses. Yet here he was, holding her steady while his expensive shoes crunched over porcelain shards, clearing a safe path. "The plates. Your meeting." Keandra's voice trembled as reality crashed back. She'd just destroyed hundreds of dollars in dinnerware and interrupted what was clearly an important business discussion. Tony Choi would fire her on the spot. Her mother's medication, the rent, everything depended on this job. "Forget the plates," Son Goku said, his thumb unconsciously stroking her waist where his hands still rested. "Are you hurt?" The genuine concern in his question made her breath catch. When was the last time anyone had asked if she was hurt? When had anyone looked at her like she mattered? The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through the thin walls of the cramped apartment at 5:30 a.m., dragging Keandra from dreams of a different life. She rolled over on the lumpy couch that served as her bed, her back protesting the uneven springs that had long since given up any pretense of comfort. "Mama," she called softly, padding barefoot across the cold linoleum to check on Denise Robson. Her mother lay propped up on pillows, the oxygen concentrator humming its mechanical lullaby beside the bed. At 52, Denise looked decades older, her once vibrant spirit dimmed by the relentless progression of heart disease. The woman who had taught third grade for 20 years, who had raised Keandra alone with fierce determination and boundless love, now struggled to climb a flight of stairs. "Morning, baby girl," Denise wheezed, managing a smile that didn't quite hide the pain. "You don't have to check on me every 5 minutes." "Yes, I do." Keandra pressed a kiss to her mother's forehead, checking the color of her lips, the rhythm of her breathing. 2 years of nursing school before financial reality forced her to drop out had taught her enough to recognize the warning signs. "Did you take your morning pills?" "All of them. Though I don't know why I bother with that expensive heart medication when we can barely afford groceries." Keandra's chest tightened. The prescription cost $300 a month, even with insurance. Between that, rent, utilities, and basic necessities, her paychecks from Hanbok Palace barely stretched to cover everything. She'd been picking up extra shifts, working doubles until her feet bled in her cheap shoes. But it was never enough. "Don't worry about the money, Mama. I've got it handled." Denise's knowing look said she wasn't fooled, but she didn't push. They both knew the precarious balance they lived in, one emergency away from losing everything. Keandra showered quickly in the tiny bathroom, the water pressure barely more than a trickle. She dressed in her black uniform, pants that had seen better days and a white blouse she'd mended twice, and braided her thick hair into a neat bun. In the cracked mirror she practiced her smile, the one that earned better tips from customers who saw her as part of the ambience, rather than a person with dreams deferred. The bus ride to South Beach took 45 minutes, giving her time to review her medical terminology flashcards. Someday, she promised herself, someday she'd finish nursing school, get a real job, move her mother somewhere with clean air and proper health care. Someday she'd be more than just a pretty face serving expensive food to people who spent more on wine than she made in a month. Meanwhile, across the city, Son Goku stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the sun paint Miami's skyline in shades of gold and crimson. The view from the 42nd floor was spectacular, but his mind was elsewhere, focused on the chess game that had consumed his life since his father built their empire from nothing. The Chen Wei situation is escalating, Jun Ho-yoon announced from behind him, his voice carrying the weight of bad news. Son Goku's closest advisor and strategist had been his father's right hand before becoming his, a man whose loyalty was absolute and whose counsel was invaluable. How escalating! Son Goku turned from the window, his expression shifting from contemplative to dangerous. At 32, he had inherited not just his father's business acumen, but his ability to project lethal calm in the face of threats. He's been making moves on our port operations. 3 of our shipping containers were randomly selected for inspection yesterday. That's not coincidence. Son Goku's jaw tightened. Chen Wei had been testing boundaries for months, probing for weaknesses in their carefully constructed empire. The Chinese businessman presented himself as a legitimate importer, but everyone in their world knew he was building his own network, one that directly threatened everything the Li family had built. He wants a meeting, Jun Ho continued. Neutral ground. Says he has a proposition that could benefit both organizations. And you believe him? I believe he's planning something. The question is whether we're better off knowing what it is or letting him think we're unprepared. Son Goku moved to his desk, a massive piece of Korean oak that had belonged to his grandfather. Every decision made from behind this desk carried consequences that rippled through dozens of lives. The weight of leadership, of protecting not just profits but people, was a burden he'd carried since his father's retirement. Set up the meeting, but not here, and not anywhere he'd expect. Where? Hanbok Palace. Public enough to discourage anything dramatic, familiar enough for us to control variables. Son Goku paused, considering. And change it to tonight. I want him off balance. Jun Ho nodded, already reaching for his phone. I'll make the arrangements. As his advisor left to coordinate the evening's chess moves, Son Goku returned to the window. Somewhere in the city below, ordinary people were starting ordinary days, unaware of the dangerous games played in shadows and boardrooms. He envied them sometimes, their simple concerns and uncomplicated lives. He had no way of knowing that one of those ordinary people would change everything. The convergence. By 3 p.m., Kiandra was already exhausted. The lunch rush at Hanbok Palace had been brutal, with every table full and the kitchen running behind. Her feet ached in her worn shoes, and she'd barely had time to grab a protein bar between seating parties and taking orders. "Girl, you look like you're about to drop," Destiny Miller observed, appearing beside her with a fresh pot of coffee. The newest member of their waitstaff was barely 19, all enthusiasm and energy that reminded Kiandra of herself before life wore down her edges. "Just tired. Mama had a rough night, so I didn't get much sleep." Destiny's expression softened. Everyone knew about Kiandra's situation, how she'd sacrificed her own dreams to care for her mother. It was part of what made her so respected among the staff, her quiet strength and unwavering loyalty. "Why don't you take a break? I can cover your section for 20 minutes. "Can't afford to. Tips have been light this week." "Kiandra." "I'm fine, Des, really." But she wasn't fine. The stress of constant worry, of never having enough money, of watching her mother slowly fade away was taking its toll. She'd been making small mistakes all day, forgetting drink orders, mixing up table numbers. Nothing major, but enough to put her on edge. At 6 p.m., Tony Choi gathered the evening staff for their usual briefing. The restaurant manager was a compact man in his 50s, efficient and demanding, with little patience for excuses or errors. "We have several important parties tonight," he announced, consulting his tablet. "Table 12 is hosting a business dinner. VIP treatment, complete discretion. I don't want to hear so much as a dropped fork from that section." Kiandra's section. Of course. "And remember," Tony continued, his gaze sweeping over the assembled servers, "Hanbok Palace's reputation depends on flawless service. One mistake can cost us a valued client." The words hit Kiandra like a physical blow. She couldn't afford to lose this job, couldn't afford even the suggestion that she was unreliable. As the staff dispersed to prepare for the evening service, she felt the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. She had no idea that across town, Son Goku was adjusting his tie and preparing for a meeting that would determine the future of his organization. Had no idea that Chen Wei was selecting his most intimidating associates for what he hoped would be a show of strength. Had no idea that a simple spill on the restaurant's marble floor would set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. The stage was set, the players were moving into position, and destiny was waiting in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The silence stretched like a taut wire, broken only by the soft crunch of glass under Son Goku's expensive Italian leather shoes. Every eye in Hanbok Palace was fixed on the tableau at table 12, the powerful Korean businessman holding a trembling black waitress against his chest, surrounded by the glittering debris of what had been a perfectly orchestrated evening. "Sir, please, I need to clean this up." Kiandra tried again to pull away, but Son Goku's grip remained firm, protective rather than possessive. "Not yet," he murmured, his dark eyes scanning the floor methodically. "Junho, call housekeeping. Full cleanup, and be careful with the glass." Junho Yoon, who had been frozen in his chair since the accident, immediately reached for his phone. The man who served as Son Goku's strategic advisor had witnessed his boss handle threats from rival organizations, navigate complex business negotiations, and make decisions that affected millions of dollars. But he'd never seen him show such immediate, instinctive protectiveness toward a stranger. "I can clean it myself," Kiandra protested, her voice stronger now but still shaky. "It's my mess, my responsibility." "Your responsibility is to not get hurt," Son Goku interrupted, his tone carrying an authority that brooked no argument. "Everything else can be replaced." The words hung in the air, loaded with meaning that neither of them fully understood yet. Around them, the restaurant's elegant atmosphere had shifted into something electric, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Tony Choi materialized beside them like a storm cloud, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Mr. Lee, I am so terribly sorry for this disruption. Miss Robson, what were you thinking? This is completely unacceptable." "Tony!" Son Goku's voice cut through the manager's tirade like a blade, quiet, but absolutely lethal. "Step back." The manager's mouth snapped shut, his face going pale as he recognized the warning in Son Goku's tone. Everyone who worked at Hanbok Palace knew that Mr. Lee was more than just another wealthy customer. His family had connections that ran deep through Miami's business community, and his displeasure could have consequences that extended far beyond a single restaurant. "Sir, I was just—" "You were about to fire her," Son Goku stated, his gaze never leaving Tony's face. "For an accident. The cost of the damaged items, the disruption to your important meeting, is my concern, not yours." Son Goku's voice remained conversational, but there was steel beneath the silk. "The lady slipped on a wet floor. That suggests a maintenance issue, doesn't it?" Tony's eyes darted to the small puddle near the kitchen doors, evidence of the leak from the air conditioning unit that housekeeping had been meaning to address all week. His face went from pale to ashen as he realized the liability implications. Yes, sir, of course. We'll have maintenance address the issue immediately." "Good. And Miss—" Son Goku looked down at Kiandra, who was still pressed against his chest, her heart hammering so hard he could feel it through their clothes. "Robson," she whispered. "Kiandra Robson. Miss Robson will receive full compensation for any injury or distress caused by the restaurant's negligence. Isn't that right, Tony?" It wasn't really a question. Tony nodded frantically, sweat beading on his forehead despite the restaurant's perfect climate control. "Of course, Mr. Lee, absolutely. Miss Robson, please accept our sincerest apologies." "Enough," Son Goku said quietly. "Go handle your other customers. I'll take care of this." Tony retreated like a scolded child, leaving Kiandra alone with the most dangerous man in Miami and his stone-faced advisor. She could feel the weight of every stare in the restaurant, the whispered conversations starting up again, as other diners pretended not to watch the drama unfolding. "You didn't have to do that," she said, finally managing to step back as housekeeping arrived with industrial-grade cleaning equipment. "I can handle Tony Choi." "I'm sure you can." Son Goku's eyes studied her face, noting the proud tilt of her chin, the way she held herself despite the humiliation of the accident. "But you shouldn't have to. I don't understand. The floor was wet. That's not your fault. Firing you for their negligence would be wrong." Kiandra stared at him, searching for the angle, the hidden motive. In her experience, powerful men didn't intervene on behalf of waitresses without expecting something in return. But his expression was unreadable, giving away nothing beyond a calm certainty that what he'd done was right. "Thank you," she said finally, the words feeling inadequate. "But I should let you get back to your meeting. I've caused enough trouble." "The meeting can wait." Son Goku glanced at Junho, who was watching the interaction with fascination. "Can't it?" "Of course," Junho agreed, though his tone suggested this was highly irregular. "Mr. Chen will understand." At the mention of Chen Wei's name, Kiandra noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The third man at their table, who had remained silent throughout the entire incident, leaned forward slightly, his eyes sharp and calculating. "Perhaps we should reschedule entirely," the man suggested, his accent marking him as mainland Chinese, "given the circumstances." "No need," Son Goku replied smoothly. "Miss Robson, would you mind bringing us fresh drinks? I believe my associates could use something stronger than tea." It was a lifeline, a way for her to retreat gracefully while maintaining her dignity. Kiandra nodded gratefully, but as she turned to leave, she caught the look that passed between Son Goku and the Chinese man. It was brief, barely a flicker, but it carried the weight of unfinished business and unspoken threats. "What can I get for you, gentlemen?" she asked, pulling out her order pad with hands that barely trembled. "Johnny Walker Blue for the table," Son Goku said. "And Miss Robson, take your time, there's no rush." As she walked toward the bar, Kiandra could feel his eyes on her, a weight that was both protective and possessive. Behind her, she heard the conversation resume in low, urgent tones, but the words were lost in the ambient noise of the restaurant. At the bar, Destiny appeared beside her like a guardian angel, her young face tight with concern. "Girl, are you okay? I saw the whole thing from across the room. Thought Tony was going to have a stroke." "I'm fine," Kiandra lied, her hands shaking as she reached for the expensive whiskey. "Just clumsy." "Clumsy nothing. That floor's been wet all week. I slipped on it yesterday and nearly went down myself." Destiny glanced toward table 12, where the three men were engaged in what looked like intense negotiation. "But seriously, Kai, do you know who that is?" "Mr. Lee, apparently." "Not just Mr. Lee, that's Son Goku Lee. His family owns half the import businesses in Miami. Word is they're connected to some serious people, if you know what I mean." Kiandra's blood chilled. She'd suspected he was more than just another wealthy businessman, but the confirmation hit her like a physical blow. "Connected how?" "The kind of connected where people who cross them tend to disappear," Destiny whispered, "and he just saved your job. Question is, what's he going to want in return?" The question followed Kiandra back to table 12, where she served the whiskey with professional efficiency, trying not to notice how Son Goku's fingers brushed hers when he took his glass, trying not to think about the implications of being under the protection of a man who might be everything her mother had warned her about. "Thank you, Miss Robson," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that seemed genuine. "You're very graceful under pressure." "Thank you, sir." "Son Goku," he corrected gently, "and I hope we'll have the chance to speak again soon." It sounded like a promise and a threat wrapped in silk. As Kiandra retreated to safety behind the bar, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a turn into territory she wasn't prepared to navigate. But she also couldn't deny the flutter of excitement in her chest, the dangerous attraction to a man who had shown her more consideration in 10 minutes than most people showed her in a lifetime. Behind her, the conversation at table 12 continued, but the dynamic had shifted. Chen Wei's proposition, whatever it was, would have to wait. Son Goku's attention was elsewhere now, focused on a woman who had stumbled into his world by accident and might just change everything. 3 days later, Kiandra's phone buzzed with a text message as she finished her shift at Hanbok Palace. The restaurant had been unusually quiet since the incident, with Tony Choi treating her with a nervous deference that felt more unsettling than his usual indifference. "Dinner tomorrow, I know a place, Pamatim Son Goku." She stared at the message, her heart racing. Somehow he'd gotten her number, probably through Tony or the restaurant's employee files. The casual tone didn't mask the underlying command in the invitation. Men like Son Goku Lee didn't ask. They expected compliance. "Who's got you looking like you've seen a ghost?" Destiny asked, appearing beside her in the employee break room. Kiandra showed her the phone. Destiny's eyes widened as she read the message. "Girl, you are playing with fire," she whispered, glancing around to make sure they were alone. "Do you know what you're getting into?" "I've been researching," Kiandra admitted. She'd spent the last 3 days diving deep into everything she could find about the Lee family, and what she'd discovered had kept her awake at night. The public face was impressive enough. Son Goku Lee, Harvard MBA, heir to Lee Enterprises, one of Miami's most successful import-export companies, philanthropist, art collector, member of several prestigious boards, the kind of man who appeared in society magazines and business journals. But the deeper she dug, the more questions arose. The Lee family's rapid rise from Korean immigrants to Miami power brokers, the whispered rumors about their business practices, the way certain journalists seemed reluctant to investigate them too closely. "And what did you find?" Destiny pressed. "Enough to know I should stay away from him." Kiandra tucked her phone into her purse. "But not enough to understand why I can't stop thinking about him." That same evening, Son Goku's penthouse. "You're making a mistake," Junho said bluntly, setting down a thick folder on Son Goku's desk. "Getting involved with her complicates everything." Son Goku looked up from the financial reports he'd been reviewing, his expression unreadable. "Define involved. Don't play word games with me. I've known you since you were 15. I've never seen you look at a woman the way you looked at her in that restaurant. She's interesting. She's a liability." Junho opened the folder, revealing a comprehensive background check on Kiandra Robson, 24 years old, dropped out of nursing school due to financial hardship. Mother has severe heart disease, father absent. No criminal record, no significant debts beyond medical bills. By all accounts, she's exactly what she appears to be, a good girl trying to survive in a bad situation. And that's a problem because good girls don't belong in our world. Because Chen Wei is already asking questions about your interest in her. Because your parents are expecting you to marry Park Soo-jin next spring, and getting distracted by a waitress isn't going to change that. Son Goku closed the financial reports and leaned back in his chair. Junho was right, of course. He always was. Getting involved with Kiandra Robson was strategically foolish, emotionally dangerous, and practically impossible, but he couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd felt in his arms. The proud tilt of her chin when she'd thanked him, the intelligence that sparked in her dark eyes. In a life carefully orchestrated around duty and expectation, she represented something he'd almost forgotten existed. Choice. "Set up security for her," he said finally. "Son Goku, discreet surveillance. I want to know if anyone approaches her, if anything unusual happens. Chen Wei's interest in our conversation the other night wasn't casual." Junho sighed, recognizing the futility of arguing when Son Goku had made up his mind. "And the dinner invitation?" "Is exactly what it appears to be. Dinner. Nothing is ever exactly what it appears to be in our world." Son Goku's smile was sharp as a blade. "No, it isn't." The next evening, Bayfront Bistro Kiandra had changed clothes 3 times before settling on a simple black dress that was elegant without being provocative. She'd told herself this was just dinner, just a way to satisfy her curiosity about a man who had shown her unexpected kindness. But as she sat across from Son Goku in the intimate restaurant overlooking Biscayne Bay, she knew she was lying to herself. "You look beautiful," he said, and the compliment felt different from the casual flattery she was used to from customers. There was weight behind it, genuine appreciation that made her pulse quicken. "Thank you. This place is incredible." She gestured toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the water. "I've never been anywhere like this. The chef is a friend of mine. Korean-French fusion. I thought you might enjoy trying something new." They ordered wine, a bottle that probably cost more than Kiandra made in a week, and fell into conversation that flowed more naturally than she'd expected. Son Goku was charming, intelligent, and surprisingly easy to talk to. He asked about her mother, her abandoned nursing studies, her dreams for the future, and he listened to her answers with genuine interest. "Why did you help me the other night?" she asked finally, the wine giving her courage to voice the question that had been haunting her. "Because it was the right thing to do." "That's not an answer." Son Goku smiled, appreciating her directness. "Because I recognized something in you. Strength, dignity, Qualities that are rarer than you might think in my world. And what world is that, exactly? The question hung between them, loaded with implications. Son Goku studied her face, weighing how much truth she could handle. A complicated one, he said finally. One where people aren't always what they seem. Like you? Especially like me. Before Kiandra could respond, the lights in the restaurant suddenly cut out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Around them, other diners murmured in confusion, but Son Goku was already moving, his hand finding hers across the table. "Stay close to me," he commanded, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. "What's happening?" "I don't know yet." But he had suspicions. The timing was too convenient, the location too isolated. As they moved toward the exit with the other confused patrons, Son Goku's phone buzzed with a text from Jun Ho. "Chen Wei's people spotted in the area. Get out now." The attack came as they reached the parking lot. 3 men in dark clothing emerged from behind parked cars, moving with military precision towards Son Goku and Kiandra. The other restaurant patrons scattered, screaming, as the men produced weapons. Son Goku pushed Kiandra behind a concrete planter and moved to intercept the attackers, with a speed and efficiency that took her breath away. She watched in horrified fascination as he disarmed the first man with brutal economy, using the attacker's own momentum against him. The second man went down hard, his weapon skittering across the asphalt. The third man, larger and more experienced than his companions, managed to land a glancing blow before Son Goku caught his wrist and twisted with surgical precision. The crack of breaking bone was audible even over the man's scream. "Who sent you?" Son Goku demanded, his voice deadly calm as he pressed his knee into the man's chest. "Go to hell," the man gasped. Son Goku's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes made the attacker's bravado crumble. "Wrong answer." "Chen Wei," the man blurted. "He wants to send a message." "Message received." Son Goku stood, pulling out his phone to call for cleanup. Around them, sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police, but Kiandra knew they would arrive to find nothing but an empty parking lot and conflicting witness accounts. "Are you hurt?" Son Goku asked, turning to her with the same gentle concern he'd shown in the restaurant. Kiandra shook her head, though she was trembling. "Who was that? What did they want?" "They wanted to hurt you to get to me," he said simply. "And that's not going to happen. Why would anyone want to hurt me? I don't even know you." Son Goku's expression softened as he helped her to her feet. "You know me well enough to be in danger, and I know you well enough to want to protect you." As they walked to his car, a sleek black sedan that had appeared as if by magic, Kiandra realized that everything had changed. The careful boundaries of her ordinary life had been shattered as completely as those plates in Hanbok Palace. She was in Son Goku's world now, whether she wanted to be or not. "What happens next?" she asked, as he held the car door open for her. "Next, I take you somewhere safe, and then we figure out how to keep you alive." The words should have terrified her. Instead, as she settled into the leather seat beside the most dangerous man she'd ever met, Kiandra felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the thrill of being truly alive. Behind them, the restaurant's lights flickered back on, and the normal world resumed its oblivious rotation. But for Kiandra Robson, there would be no going back to normal. She had crossed a line she didn't even know existed, and on the other side waited possibilities that both thrilled and terrified her. 1 week later, the Lee family estate in Coral Gables was a monument to success and tradition, its Korean-inspired architecture seamlessly blended with Miami luxury. As Son Goku's car wound up the circular drive, Kiandra felt her anxiety spike. The manicured gardens, the fountain featuring traditional Korean dragons, the subtle but unmistakable security presence. Everything screamed old money and older expectations. "They're going to hate me," she said, smoothing her dress for the 10th time. She'd chosen her most conservative outfit, a navy blue dress that covered everything it should, but she still felt underdressed for whatever awaited inside. "They're going to be surprised," Son Goku corrected, his hand finding hers. "There's a difference." "Is there? When was the last time you brought a black waitress home to meet your parents?" "When was the last time I brought anyone home to meet my parents?" The question hung between them as they pulled up to the main entrance. Kiandra realized she didn't know the answer, didn't know anything about Son Goku's romantic history or family expectations. The past week had been a whirlwind of stolen moments between her shifts at the restaurant, careful conversations that revealed layers of complexity beneath his polished exterior, and the constant awareness that they were being watched by both his security and Chen Wei's people. "Son Goku," she said as he came around to open her door, "what exactly are you expecting from tonight?" He paused, his hand on the door handle. "Honestly, I'm expecting my mother to be difficult and my father to be calculating. I'm expecting you to be magnificent and them to eventually realize what I already know, which is that you're worth fighting for." The front door opened before they reached it, revealing a woman in her early 60s who could have stepped from the pages of a Korean fashion magazine. Mrs. Lee Soo-min was elegant in the way that only came from generations of breeding and education, her silver hair styled in a perfect chignon, her silk hanbok a masterpiece of traditional craftsmanship adapted for modern wear. Her eyes, dark and intelligent like her son's, took in every detail of Kiandra's appearance in a single devastating glance. "Mother," Son Goku said in Korean, bowing slightly, "this is Kiandra Robson." "Miss Robson." Mrs. Lee's English was flawless, her accent barely detectable. "How unexpected." The word carried enough ice to freeze the Miami heat. Kiandra felt the judgment in that single syllable, the dismissal wrapped in politeness. But she'd faced worse than disapproving mothers. She'd faced poverty, racism, and the slow death of dreams deferred. This was just another challenge to navigate. "Mrs. Lee," she replied, offering a respectful bow that she hoped was appropriate. "Thank you for welcoming me into your home." "Did I welcome you?" Mrs. Lee asked, the question sharp enough to draw blood. "Soo-min," the voice came from behind her, carrying quiet authority. "Mr. Lee Sang-min appeared in the doorway, a man in his 70s who had clearly passed his steel spine to his son. "Our guest deserves better manners." "Of course," Mrs. Lee said, stepping aside with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Please, come in." The interior of the house was a study in understated luxury, Korean antiques mixed with contemporary art, traditional screens alongside modern furniture. Everything spoke of wealth that had been carefully cultivated over generations, of a family that had built something lasting and significant. Jun-ho was waiting in the living room, his presence a reminder that this wasn't just a family dinner, but a strategic meeting. He nodded respectfully to Kiandra, but she could see the concern in his eyes. Whatever Son Goku was planning, his closest advisor wasn't entirely on board. "Please sit, Mr. Lee said, gesturing to an antique sofa that probably cost more than Kiandra's annual salary. "Would you care for tea?" "That would be lovely, thank you." As Mrs. Lee prepared the tea service with ritualistic precision, Kiandra felt the weight of examination. Every movement was being analyzed, every word weighed for significance. She'd known this would be difficult, but the reality was more intense than she'd imagined. "So, Miss Robson," Mr. Lee said once they were all seated, "my son tells me you work at Hanbok Palace." "Yes, sir, I'm a server there." "And before that?" "I was studying nursing at Miami-Dade College. I had to leave to care for my mother." "How unfortunate," Mrs. Lee said, her tone suggesting it was unfortunate in more ways than one. "And your family? What do they do?" The questions came like surgical strikes, designed to expose every weakness, every difference between Kiandra's world and theirs. She answered honestly, her mother's illness, her father's absence, their financial struggles, watching Mrs. Lee's expression grow more disapproving with each revelation. "I see," Mrs. Lee said finally. "And you met my son when you fell down in front of his table?" "Mother," Son Goku warned, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "I'm simply trying to understand the circumstances," Mrs. Lee replied innocently. "It's quite a romantic story, isn't it? The wealthy businessman and the clumsy waitress." "Soo-min," Mr. Lee's voice carried a warning of its own, but Mrs. Lee was just getting started. "Tell me, Miss Robson, what are your intentions regarding my son?" "I'm sorry? Surely you understand that Son Goku has responsibilities to his family, to our business, to our community. He's expected to marry appropriately to someone who can contribute to our family's legacy. And you don't think I can do that? I think you're a lovely young woman who's found herself in a situation far beyond her understanding or capability." The words hit like physical blows, each one precisely calculated to wound. Kiandra felt her cheeks burn with humiliation and anger, but she kept her voice steady. "You're right," she said quietly. "I don't understand your world. I don't know the rules or the expectations, but I understand your son. I see the man he is when he's not performing for anyone else. And what man is that? Someone who's tired of being what everyone else expects him to be. Someone who wants to choose his own path for once in his life. Mrs. Lee's laugh was like breaking glass. How naive. Do you think this is some romantic fairy tale? That love conquers all? My son's life was planned before he was born. His marriage has been arranged since he was 15. Park Soo-jin is a lovely girl from an excellent family. Mother, enough. Son Goku's voice cut through the room like a blade. Kiandra is my guest, and she will be treated with respect. Respect? Mrs. Lee stood, her composure finally cracking. You want me to respect this as this girl who thinks she can waltz into our family and change everything? She's using you, Son Goku. Can't you see that? The only person using anyone here is you, Son Goku replied, rising to face his mother. Using guilt and obligation to control my life. I'm protecting your future. You're protecting your own vision of what my future should be. The argument erupted in rapid Korean, voices rising as years of tension finally exploded. Kiandra sat frozen, understanding the emotion if not the words, watching the family she'd hoped to join tear itself apart over her presence. Mr. Lee finally intervened, his voice cutting through the chaos with quiet authority. Enough, both of you. The room fell silent except for Mrs. Lee's harsh breathing. She looked at Kiandra with undisguised hatred, then at her son with something that might have been heartbreak. If you choose her, she said in English, her voice deadly calm, you choose to lose everything else, your family, your inheritance, your place in our community. Is she worth that? Son Goku looked at Kiandra, seeing the tears she was trying not to shed, the dignity she maintained even in the face of such cruelty. Yes, he said simply, she is. Mrs. Lee's face went white. Without another word, she turned and walked from the room, her footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Mr. Lee sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 70 years. You've made your choice, son. I hope you're prepared for the consequences. As they left the estate an hour later, Kiandra felt the weight of what had just happened. She'd cost Son Goku his family, his inheritance, possibly his entire future. The guilt was overwhelming. I'm sorry, she whispered as they drove away from the only home he'd ever known. For what? For ruining everything. For coming between you and your family. Son Goku pulled over, turning to face her in the darkness of the car. You didn't ruin anything. You revealed what was already broken. But your mother will come around or she won't. That's her choice to make. And if she doesn't? Son Goku's smile was sad, but determined. Then I'll build something new, something better. Something that includes you. As he leaned over to kiss her, Kiandra tasted the salt of her own tears and the promise of a future that was uncertain but undeniably theirs to create. The city sparkled below them like scattered diamonds, but Kiandra barely noticed the view from Son Goku's floor-to-ceiling windows. She'd been quiet since leaving the restaurant where they'd shared what was officially their third date, though it felt like they'd known each other for years rather than weeks. For you're thinking too hard, Son Goku observed, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of wine. I can practically hear the gears turning, just processing everything. She accepted the wine, but didn't drink, her fingers tracing the rim of the crystal glass. Your mother's words keep echoing in my head. Forget what she said. Can you really just forget that your own mother thinks I'm using you? Son Goku set down his wine and turned to face her fully. In the soft lighting of his penthouse, he looked younger somehow, less like the dangerous businessman and more like the man she was falling for, despite every rational instinct. My mother has spent her entire life believing that love is a luxury we can't afford, he said quietly, that everything must be calculated, planned, arranged for maximum benefit. She married my father because it was advantageous for both families, not because she loved him. And were they happy? They were compatible, respectful. They built something together, but it was built on duty, not passion. He moved closer, his hand finding her cheek. I don't want that. I've never wanted that. What do you want? This. His thumb traced her jawline, sending shivers through her entire body. You. The way you challenge me. The way you see through all the pretense to who I really am underneath. And who are you underneath? Son Goku's smile was rueful. Someone who's tired of being what everyone else needs me to be. Someone who wants to choose his own path for once. The vulnerability in his voice broke something open in Kiandra's chest. This wasn't the controlled, dangerous man who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. This was just Son Goku, stripped of all pretense, offering her something precious and fragile. "I'm scared," she admitted, "of your world, of the danger, of not being enough for someone like you." "Someone like me?" "Powerful, sophisticated, used to having everything you want." "I've never wanted anything the way I want you," he said, his voice rough with honesty. "And that terrifies me more than any business rival or family obligation ever could." The confession hung between them, raw and honest and completely unexpected. Kiandra had been prepared for smooth seduction, for the practiced charm of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. She hadn't been prepared for this: genuine emotion, real vulnerability, the sense that she held something irreplaceable in her hands. "Son Goku, I know it's complicated. I know I'm asking you to trust me with your life, literally, but I need you to know that what I feel for you isn't some passing fascination. It's not about conquest or novelty or rebellion against my family's expectations." "Then what is it about?" He was quiet for a long moment, searching for words to explain something he'd never felt before. "Do you know what it's like to live your entire life performing? To never be able to let your guard down? Never be able to show weakness or uncertainty or simple human need?" Kiandra thought about her own life, the constant struggle to appear strong for her mother, to maintain dignity in the face of financial hardship, to smile and serve people who looked through her as if she were invisible. "Yes," she said softly, "I think I do. With you, I don't have to perform. I can just be." "Do you have any idea how rare that is?" The words hit her like a physical blow, not because they hurt, but because they revealed a loneliness she recognized in her own soul. They were both performers, both people who had learned to hide their true selves behind carefully constructed masks. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "When I'm with you, I don't have to be the struggling single daughter, or the grateful employee, or the strong one who never needs help. I can just be Kiandra." "Then be Kiandra," he said, stepping closer until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Be real with me." "I'm falling for you," she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I know it's crazy. I know it's dangerous. But I can't help it. You make me feel like I matter, like I'm worth something more than just surviving." "You are worth everything," he said fiercely. "Everything I have, everything I am, everything I could ever be." The kiss, when it came, was inevitable as gravity. His lips found hers with a gentleness that belied his reputation, a reverence that made her knees weak. This wasn't the calculated seduction she'd expected, but something deeper, more honest, a claiming that went both ways. Kiandra melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as he deepened the kiss. She could taste wine and want, and something that might have been desperation, as if he needed this connection as much as she did. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Stay," he whispered against her lips. "Not for anything more than this. Just stay with me tonight." The request was vulnerable in a way that commands never were. He wasn't taking, he was asking. Wasn't demanding, he was hoping. "Okay," she breathed, and felt something fundamental shift between them. They spent the next hour on his couch, talking in the way that only people falling in love can talk, about everything and nothing, sharing stories and dreams and fears they'd never voiced to anyone else. Son Goku told her about the pressure of living up to his father's legacy, about the isolation that came with power, about the loneliness of never knowing if people wanted him or what he could provide. Kiandra shared her own struggles, the guilt of leaving school, the fear of losing her mother, the dreams she'd put aside to survive. She told him about the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, wondering if this was all her life would ever be, if she'd ever be more than just someone trying to make it through another day. "You're going to finish nursing school," he said with quiet certainty. "I'll make sure of it. I can't let you pay for not paying for it, investing in it, in you, in us." The word us hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and promise. It was the first time either of them had acknowledged that this was becoming something bigger than attraction, something that might have a future. "What does us look like in your world?" she asked. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I want to find out. With you." When he finally kissed her again, it was with the weight of that promise behind it. This time, when his hands tangled in her hair and her body pressed against his, there was no hesitation, no holding back. They were choosing each other. Consequences be damned. The kiss deepened, became something urgent and necessary. Kiandra felt herself drowning in sensation, the taste of him, the feel of his hands on her skin, the way he whispered her name like a prayer. When he pulled back to look at her, his eyes were dark with want and something deeper. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough with restraint. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." What followed was tender and passionate and completely overwhelming. Son Goku made love to her like she was something precious, something to be cherished rather than conquered. He took his time learning every curve and hollow of her body, making her feel beautiful and desired and utterly, completely his. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in his massive bed, Kiandra felt the world had fundamentally shifted. She was no longer just Kiandra Robson, struggling waitress trying to survive. She was Kiandra Robson, woman in love with the most dangerous man in Miami. "No going back now," she whispered against his chest. "No going back," he agreed, his arms tightening around her. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Outside, Miami slept on, unaware that two people had just changed the trajectory of their lives forever. But in the penthouse high above the city, Kiandra and Son Goku held each other and planned for a future that was uncertain but undeniably theirs. The third encounter had become the first night of the rest of their lives. Kiandra was clearing table 6 when she noticed the man in the expensive suit watching her. He'd been nursing the same cup of coffee for an hour, his eyes tracking her movements with predatory focus. Something about his stillness, his patience, set off every alarm bell she'd developed since entering Son Goku's world. "Des," she whispered to Destiny, who was refilling water glasses nearby. "Do you know that guy at table 8? Destiny glanced over, her face immediately tightening with concern. "Never seen him before, but he's been asking Tony questions about you." "What kind of questions?" "Your schedule, how long you've worked here, whether you have any special relationships with customers." Kiandra's blood chilled. Over the past 2 weeks, she and Son Goku had been careful, meeting away from the restaurant, keeping their relationship as private as possible. But in a world where information was currency, privacy was just an illusion. The man stood as she approached his table, his smile cold and calculating. "Miss Robson? My name is Chen Wei. I believe we have mutual friends." The name hit her like a physical blow. This was Son Goku's rival, the man whose people had attacked them at the restaurant. Up close, he was smaller than she'd expected, unremarkable except for his eyes, which held the flat, emotionless quality of a predator. "I don't think we have anything to discuss," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Oh, but we do. Please sit. I have some information that might interest you. I'm working. Your manager has given you a break. Sit." It wasn't a request. Kiandra glanced toward Tony's office and saw him watching through the window, his face pale with fear. Whatever Chen Wei had said to him, it had been enough to ensure cooperation. She sat, every muscle in her body tense for flight. "You're even more beautiful than the photographs," Chen Wei said conversationally. "I can see why Son Goku is so distracted. What do you want?" "To educate you. About the man you've been sharing your bed with." He slid a manila envelope across the table. "Go ahead, open it." With trembling fingers, Kiandra opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, documents, newspaper clippings, a comprehensive dossier on Son Goku's activities over the past 5 years. Her heart sank as she recognized the evidence of everything he'd claimed to be leaving behind. "This was taken last week," Chen Wei said, pointing to a photograph of Son Goku meeting with known criminals. "And this one 3 days ago." Another photo, this one showing him at what was clearly a drug transaction. "Your boyfriend has been very busy while romancing you. These could be fake." "Could be, but they're not." Chen Wei leaned back, enjoying her distress. "Did you really think he was going to abandon his empire for a waitress? That love would conquer all? You don't know what you're talking about. I know that while he's been whispering sweet promises in your ear, he's been expanding his territory, eliminating rivals, building an operation that makes my business look like a corner store." Chen Wei's smile was razor-sharp. "He's been lying to you, Miss Robson, about everything." Kiandra stared at the photographs, her world crumbling with each image. There was Son Goku, unmistakably him, in situations that contradicted everything he'd told her about stepping away from the criminal side of his business. "Why are you showing me this?" she whispered. "Because I need you to deliver a message. Tell your lover that his expansion into my territory ends now, or I'll make sure everyone he cares about pays the price." Chen Wei's eyes glittered with malice. Starting with you. He'll never what? Choose you over his empire. You're right, he won't. But he might choose his empire over your safety. Chen Wei stood, straightening his tie. Think carefully about what you're really worth to him, Miss Robson. And remember, I know where you live, where your mother receives her treatments, where you go to feel safe. There is nowhere in this city that my reach doesn't extend. As he walked away, leaving her alone with the damning evidence, Kiandra felt something die inside her chest. The fairy tale was over. Reality had come crashing back with devastating force. That evening, Son Goku's penthouse. Son Goku knew something was wrong the moment Kiandra walked through his door. Her usual warmth was gone, replaced by a brittle composure that reminded him of his mother's diplomatic mask. How was work? He asked, moving to embrace her. She stepped back, avoiding his touch. Interesting, I had a visitor. Oh? But he already knew. The ice in her voice, the way she held herself. Someone had gotten to her. Chen Wei stopped by for coffee. He had some fascinating things to show me. She pulled out the manila envelope, throwing it onto his coffee table where the photograph spilled across the glass surface. Son Goku's face went carefully blank as he looked at the evidence of his recent activities. Kiandra, don't. Her voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare lie to me again. I've seen enough lies to last a lifetime. I can explain. Explain what? How you've been building your criminal empire while telling me you were getting out. How you've been lying to my face every single day for weeks. Tears ran down her cheeks, but her voice remained steady. Explain how you made me believe that what we had was real when it was all just another manipulation. It is real. Nothing about you is real. The words exploded from her. Years of pain and disappointment finally finding their target. You're exactly what everyone warned me you were. A criminal who uses people and throws them away when they're no longer useful. Son Goku moved toward her, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. Kiandra, please, let me explain what you're seeing. I'm seeing the truth. Finally. She backed away from him, her eyes blazing with hurt and fury. You told me you were leaving this life behind. You made me believe that I mattered enough for you to change. But you never had any intention of changing, did you? This was all just a game to you. No. What we have, what I feel for you, that's the most real thing in my life. Then prove it. The words came out as a challenge, raw and desperate. Choose. Right now. Choose between your empire and me. Between the life you've always known and the life we could build together. Son Goku felt the weight of the ultimatum settle on his shoulders, like a physical burden. Everything he'd built, everything his father had sacrificed to create, everything that defined who he was, she was asking him to walk away from all of it. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Kiandra's voice broke, revealing the pain beneath her anger. Either you want me enough to leave this world behind or you don't. Either I'm worth more to you than power and money and fear, or I'm not. You are. God, Kiandra, you're worth everything to me. Then prove it. Walk away, tonight. Leave it all behind and choose me. Son Goku stared at her, seeing the desperate hope warring with resignation in her eyes. She was asking him to choose between everything he'd ever known and everything he'd ever wanted, between duty and desire, between the man he'd been raised to be and the man he wanted to become. The words stuck in his throat, because the truth was, he couldn't. Not yet. There were too many people depending on him, too many obligations that couldn't be abandoned overnight. I need time to do this right, to make sure everyone who depends on me is protected. Time. Kiandra's laugh was bitter as broken glass. There's always going to be one more obligation, one more responsibility, one more reason why you can't choose me, isn't there? That's not... It is. And I'm done being the woman who waits while you figure out if she's worth the sacrifice. She moved toward the door, her steps measured and final. I'm done being second choice to your empire. Kiandra, wait. She turned back, and the look in her eyes nearly brought him to his knees. I love you, she said simply. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone or anything, but I won't be with someone who can't love me enough to choose me when it matters. Please, don't do this. Don't throw away what we have because... Because what? Because I'm asking you to be the man you claimed you wanted to be. Because I'm asking you to keep the promises you made. She shook her head, tears streaming freely now. I'm not throwing anything away, Son Goku. You already did that the moment you decided your empire was more important than your word. The door closed behind her, with a soft click that sounded like the end of the world. Son Goku stood in his empty penthouse, surrounded by the evidence of his deception, and felt something break inside his chest. For the first time in his adult life, he had found something more valuable than power, more important than duty, more precious than the empire his family had built. And he had just lost it through his own cowardice. 3 days later, the call came at 2 a.m., jarring Son Goku from restless sleep. Junho's voice was tight with urgency. "Chen Wei has her." Son Goku was already moving, pulling on clothes with mechanical precision. "Where?" "Warehouse district. He's demanding a meeting. Says if you want her back, you come alone. And if I don't?" He made his position very clear. "She dies." Son Goku closed his eyes, seeing Kiandra's face as she'd walked away from him, seeing the love and disappointment and resignation in her eyes, seeing the future they could have had together disappearing into the darkness. "Set it up," he said quietly. "And Junho, if this goes wrong, if something happens to me, burn it all down. Every operation, every safe house, every connection. Leave nothing for Chen Wei to claim. Son Goku, promise me." "I promise." As Son Goku prepared for what might be his final meeting, he thought about choices and consequences, about the price of power and the cost of love. He thought about Kiandra's ultimatum and his failure to meet it, but mostly he thought about a woman who had asked him to choose her, and how he was finally ready to give her the answer she deserved, even if it killed him. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the small house in Coconut Grove, casting golden light across the nursery that Son Goku had painted himself. Soft yellow walls, white furniture, and a mobile of paper cranes that his mother had made, each one folded with the precision that came from decades of practice and the love that came from finally understanding what truly mattered. Kiandra sat in the rocking chair, their 3-month-old daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms. Little Su-jin, named for her grandmother in a gesture of reconciliation that had brought tears to Mrs. Lee's eyes, was perfect in the way that only babies could be, with her father's dark hair and her mother's expressive eyes. "She's going to be spoiled rotten," Kiandra murmured as Son Goku appeared in the doorway with coffee for both of them. "By my mother, you mean?" "By everyone. Your parents, my mother, Junho, even Destiny. I've never seen grown adults turn into such fools over a baby." Son Goku smiled, settling on the arm of the chair to look down at his daughter. The past 18 months had changed everything. His priorities, his business, his entire understanding of what success really meant. The night Chen Wei had taken Kiandra, Son Goku had walked into that warehouse prepared to die for her. Instead, he'd found something else entirely. The clarity that came from finally knowing what he was willing to sacrifice everything to protect. The confrontation had been brutal but brief. Chen Wei's mistake had been underestimating how far Son Goku would go for love. By dawn, Chen Wei's organization was dismantled, his operations absorbed or destroyed, and the man himself was facing federal charges that would keep him locked away for the rest of his life. But the real transformation had come afterward, when Son Goku had kept the promise he'd been too afraid to make before. He'd walked away from the criminal side of his empire, legitimizing operations, cutting ties with dangerous partners, building something clean that his daughter could inherit with pride. It hadn't been easy. There had been threats, attempts at retaliation, moments when he'd wondered if he was destroying everything his father had built. But every time doubt crept in, he looked at Kiandra and remembered what he'd almost lost through his own cowardice. "Nursing school graduation is next month," Kiandra said, shifting the baby to her shoulder. "I still can't believe I'm actually going to finish. I never doubted it. You're the strongest person I know. Strong enough to survive your mother's cooking lessons." Son Goku laughed. The relationship between Kiandra and Mrs. Lee had been rocky at first, but the baby had changed everything. The moment Mrs. Lee had held her granddaughter for the first time, all pretense had crumbled. Love, it turned out, really could conquer prejudice, given enough time and the right motivation. "She's trying to make up for lost time," he said, "and she genuinely wants to help." "I know. It's just, I never expected to have a Korean mother-in-law teaching me to make kimchi while my own mother teaches her to make cornbread." Stranger things have happened. "Name one." "A waitress falling in love with a reformed criminal and living happily ever after." Kiandra looked up at him, her eyes soft with the contentment that had replaced the wariness of their early days. "Are we living happily ever after?" "We're living," Son Goku said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "Really living for the first time in our lives. That's better than any fairy tale." The baby stirred in her arms, making the soft sounds that meant she was waking up. In a few minutes, the peaceful morning would give way to the beautiful chaos of feeding time, diaper changes, and the 1,000 small moments that made up their new life. "Any regrets?" Kiandra asked, the question she'd stopped asking months ago but still wondered about sometimes. "Only one," Son Goku said seriously. "That I waited so long to choose you, that I almost lost you because I was too afraid to let go of who I thought I had to be. And now? Now I know who I really am. I'm Sujin's father, your husband, a man who builds things instead of destroying them, a man who chooses love over fear every single day." The baby opened her eyes, looking up at her parents with the serious expression that reminded everyone of her grandfather. In a few hours, both sets of grandparents would arrive for Sunday dinner, a tradition that had started awkwardly but had become the foundation of their new, blended family. Denise Robson's health had improved dramatically since she'd been able to afford proper treatment, and she'd become unlikely friends with Mr. Lee, bonding over their shared pride in their children and grandchild. Mrs. Lee had taken longer to come around, but the baby had melted even her formidable reserve. "I love you," Kiandra said, the words as natural as breathing now. "I love you too, both of you, more than I ever thought possible." Outside, Miami was waking up to another beautiful day. Somewhere in the city, other people were making choices between duty and desire, between fear and love, between the lives they'd always known and the lives they dared to dream about. But in the small house in Coconut Grove, 3 people who had found each other against all odds were simply enjoying the miracle of an ordinary morning. The waitress who had slipped and fallen into love, the criminal who had chosen redemption, the baby who had brought 2 worlds together. It wasn't the ending anyone could have predicted, but it was the beginning of everything that mattered. As Son Goku watched his wife and daughter in the morning light, he thought about the moment that had started it all. Kiandra falling in front of his table, him catching her before she could hit the ground. He'd thought he was saving her then. Now he knew the truth. She had been saving him all along.